My name is Darvin. I live in a town where the traffic lights don't always work, but everyone still slows down. The kind of place where people wave without needing to know your name. I've lived here all my life, long enough to know the rhythm of things. What blooms in March, what dies by October, which neighbors leave their porch lights on year-round. Mallory arrived 4 springs ago. Not like a gust of wind or a beam of light. No, she moved in 3 houses down with 2 suitcases and a plant that never seemed to grow. She didn't introduce herself right away. I noticed her walking early in the mornings, always with headphones in, never making eye contact. But she waved at dogs. Always at dogs. I didn't plan to fall for her. It just happened. The first real conversation we had was about a dead bird on the sidewalk. She bent down and moved it gently to the grass. She didn't say anything poetic or strange. Just looked at me and said, "Things shouldn't disappear in the open." That sentence stuck with me. And maybe that's what this story is really about. Things that disappear in the open. Right in front of you. Without sound or ceremony. Mallory was never loud. She wasn't the type to storm out of rooms or throw plates. Her absence grew like fog. Slow and only noticeable once you were surrounded by it. By the time we got engaged, I'd stopped noticing the small absences. The missing laughter. The skipped questions. The way she no longer reached for my hand without reason. I mistook stillness for comfort. I thought quiet meant safe. I was wrong. The ring I bought her wasn't anything flashy. No celebrity sparkle. Just a small sapphire surrounded by a thin gold band. She once told me she liked stones that looked like they remembered the ocean. I believed her. I always believed her. But here's the part one haven't said yet. She didn't know I had the ring. I'd been carrying it for 3 weeks. Waiting for the right moment. It wasn't going to be a grand gesture. Just the 2 of us, maybe after dinner while folding laundry or brushing our teeth. Something ordinary. Something real. But then little things began to feel off. She started going out more. Saying it was just drinks with coworkers, though she'd never cared for going out before. Her clothes changed too, more vibrant, tighter, newer. One night she came home and smelled like cedarwood, and I didn't own anything that smelled like that. Still, I said nothing. I told myself stories to fill the gaps. That's what love does, I think. It builds stories out of silence. The night everything shifted, she said she was going out with a friend, a name I didn't recognize, but pretended to. I watched her leave in a long black coat, heels I hadn't seen in months, and that lipstick she only wore when she wanted to feel powerful. She didn't kiss me goodbye. Just waved from the doorway with her phone in her hand. I sat on the couch. Ring box in my palm. No candles, no music, no speeches. Just quiet. And then I did something I never thought I would. I got up, walked to the entry table, grabbed a small padded envelope and slipped the ring box inside. No note. No explanation. Just the weight of what could have been. Then I called a car. And I sent it to the bar she said she'd be at. I didn't follow. I didn't call. I just sat by the window as the car pulled away, knowing that what came next would change everything. And it did. But not in the way you're expecting. What happened next tore the seams off everything I thought I understood, not just about her, but about myself. And in the days that followed, I would come to understand one truth no one ever warned me about. Betrayal doesn't always sound like breaking glass. Sometimes it sounds like nothing at all. It's strange how still a kitchen can feel when it's just been left behind. The faucet still dripped. The chair by the door still creaked when the heat kicked on. Mallory's mug was still on the counter, green ceramic, chipped at the rim, half full of licorice tea. She never finished her tea anymore. I stood in the doorway for a long time, not moving. I wasn't sad. Not in the way people expect. It was more like being underwater. Not drowning, just suspended. Quiet. Dull. Slow. I opened the drawer where she kept her scarves. I wasn't looking for anything. I don't even know why I did it. Maybe I just needed to prove to myself that she still lived here. That there was still softness, still warmth. But the drawer was empty. Every scarf gone. Every note she'd tucked in my coat pocket. Every photograph. Gone. It didn't make sense. She hadn't packed. She hadn't moved out. But she was erasing herself in small ways. It was like I was walking through a house after the fire's already been put out. Nothing's still burning, but you can smell what's missing. I sat at the kitchen table. The ring wasn't here anymore, it was on its way to her. Riding quietly in the back of a car that probably smelled like old cologne and vinyl seats. I wondered if she'd open it in front of him. Or if she'd hide it under the table like a secret she didn't want to unwrap. There were 2 voices in my head. One said, "This isn't real. You're imagining it." The other said, "You already knew. You just couldn't stand the shape of the truth." It was raining now. I remember that because I stood at the window and watched the water collect along the curb, rippling like something alive. A woman in a red coat passed by with an umbrella shaped like a sunflower. I watched her vanish around the corner. I didn't know who she was, but she looked like someone who had somewhere to go. I didn't. I stayed there for hours. Eventually, I picked up the phone. Not to call Mallory. To call the bar. I didn't ask to speak to her. I didn't ask who she was with. All I said was, "Did a package arrive?" The guy on the phone paused. Then said, "Yeah. Pretty one." Left it on the bar top. Girl picked it up. She looked surprised. Was she alone? Another pause. "No," he said slowly. "She wasn't." I hung up. Not because I was angry. Not even because I was hurt. But because I didn't want to hear the rest. I knew the story already. I just spent the last year living inside its pages, pretending not to read. And still, I wasn't ready for what came the next day. Because as quiet as betrayal feels, exposure comes loudly. And sometimes it doesn't wait for you to be ready. The morning after started like any other, that's the cruel part. The sky looked the same. My alarm went off at 6:40. I sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on knees, watching the closet door sway slightly from the draft that always came in through the corner window. She wasn't home. Not unusual, not exactly. She'd stayed out overnight twice before. Brianna's, she said the first time. Had too many, crashed at Callie's, she said the second. I hadn't asked questions. Part of me thought silence was strength. That not asking meant trusting. But it wasn't trust. It was fear in costume. I walked down to the kitchen. The licorice tea mug was gone. In its place, a clean glass turned upside down on the dish towel. Her way of saying, "I was here." I was careful. It felt colder than a note. I sat by the window again. The same spot where I'd watched the car take the ring the night before. The street was empty. A breeze kicked up a single piece of paper that flapped in circles near the gutter before falling flat. Even the wind had somewhere better to be. I didn't eat. Didn't shower. I opened my laptop and stared at the blank desktop for what felt like hours. No work emails. No distractions. My mind kept replaying one question. Not did she cheat? I already knew that answer. The real question was, how long had I been clapping for a show that ended months ago? She came home at 11:16 a.m. I remember the time because the clock above the stove ticked in that irritating way again, the kind of noise you only notice when the room is holding its breath. The door opened quietly. She stepped in like she lived here, like nothing about the air had changed. Sunglasses. High ponytail. Jeans she never wore around me. A small paper bag from the cafe on Elm Street, the one we used to go to together before she started going alone. I watched her pause when she saw me. Not freeze, just slow down. Like a dancer missing a beat but pretending it was part of the routine. "Oh, you're home." Her voice was light, easy. Too easy. "I live here," I said calmly. She nodded, set her bag down. Pulled out a croissant, tore it in half. "Want some?" I shook my head. She didn't ask why. I stared at her hands. No ring. Not even the box. That's when I spoke. "It arrived, didn't it?" There was a slight lift of her brow. A pause in the way she chewed. "The package?" Another pause. Then, "Yeah, it did." Silence. Heavy. Not tense, just tired. "What did you think of it?" She set the croissant down. Wiped her fingers too thoroughly with a napkin. "It was a lot." No smile. No tears. No questions. "I thought about what I'd say when you opened it," I murmured, voice flatter than I expected. "I imagined your reaction. I wondered if your heart would stop. Or if maybe you'd realize something." Mallory folded the napkin neatly, placed it beside the pastry. "I did realize something." I waited. She didn't continue. So I asked, "What?" She finally looked up. Not angry. Not guilty. Just tired. That I've been living two versions of myself. And neither one feels real anymore. There it was. Not an apology. Not even a confession. Just a quiet resignation, as if she were describing a dream she had, not something she did. I looked at her for a long time. The sunlight hit her face just enough to make it hard to stare directly. Her beauty hadn't changed. That's what made it worse. She still looked like the woman I loved. She just wasn't her anymore. So who was he? I didn't want the details. I didn't need the name. She hesitated. That alone was enough. I stood up. "Don't answer. I don't need to know who he was. I already know who I was. That's enough." "Darvin," she said quietly. "It wasn't about it." "Don't," I interrupted. Not loud. Just final. She didn't chase me as I walked upstairs. She didn't follow when I came back down with my jacket. She didn't ask where I was going. And maybe that was the worst part. Because sometimes it's not the betrayal itself that undoes you, it's how easy it is for the person you love to let you go. I didn't leave the house that day. I said I would, maybe even meant to, but I stayed. I walked out the front door, crossed the street, circled the block like someone trying to remember what moving forward feels like. And then I came back. I sat in my car, engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel as the hours dissolved behind the windshield. I don't remember thinking about anything. That's the part people always get wrong. They think betrayal explodes in your head, fills you with fire and fury. But for me, it was more like trying to tune a radio that wouldn't stop whispering. Static. Nothing sharp. Just numbness edged with a quiet kind of disbelief. Mallory stayed inside. I saw the lights flicker on in the kitchen around 6. Then the living room lamp. At one point, she opened the blinds and glanced outside, but not like she was looking for me. Just glancing. I don't even think she noticed the car. I don't think she wanted to. Eventually, I went back inside. She was sitting on the couch, legs crossed, her laptop open but untouched. A documentary was playing. Something about migratory birds. I stood in the doorway for a full minute. She didn't look up. The air between us felt like a hallway with no exits. I sat down in the armchair across from her. She muted the TV. Still didn't look at me. I never asked, I said, voice quiet, level, like I was commenting on the weather. But I'm going to now. She tilted her head, waited. How long? Mallory didn't pretend not to understand. She took a slow breath like someone about to dive under. 3 months. I nodded. No reaction. It landed like I expected it to. Dull. Familiar. I had already guessed 6. 3 felt like a mercy I didn't deserve. Is it still going on? She hesitated, that tiny flicker of calculation that lives in the corner of every liar's eye. I don't know, she said, which wasn't a lie, and that made it worse. Who is he? She paused again. Not the pause of someone ashamed, but the pause of someone who knew the answer would burn. I don't think I should say. That was the first time I laughed. Not loud, not cruel. Just a short, broken sound that fell between us like a dropped spoon. I leaned forward, hands clasped, elbows on knees. I sent you a ring. I sent you my future. You opened it in front of someone who was never supposed to know you the way I did. And now you're protecting him. Her eyes softened, and I hated her for it. I hated how gently she looked at me. Like I was the one who needed to be handled with care. I'm not protecting him, she said. I'm protecting you. No, Mallory. You're protecting yourself. She didn't argue. Didn't cry. Didn't plead. She just looked away and whispered, maybe I am. That night, I slept in the guest room. Not because I wanted space, but because I didn't want to breathe the same air. I didn't want to hear her turn in bed or hum a song while brushing her teeth or smell that jasmine lotion she wore like armor. I lay on the too firm mattress, staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds between my heartbeats. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even broken. I just felt hollow. Like someone had taken everything out of me and left the shell standing because it still looked human. The next morning, I made coffee and left it on the kitchen counter. Black. No sugar. Just the way she hated it. It wasn't a message. It was a mistake. I'd forgotten she was still here. She didn't drink it, of course. When I came back in, her cup was there instead, milky beige, just enough cinnamon. Our mugs sat side by side, 2 people who used to love each other, saying nothing. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a man I didn't recognize standing on our porch. Early 40s, pressed gray shirt, dark circles under his eyes like bruises that hadn't healed right. He looked at me the way someone looks at a cliff, unsure whether they're about to climb it or fall off. Is she here? He asked, voice thin. I didn't ask who he meant. I didn't need to. I stepped aside. She's in the living room. He didn't thank me. Didn't explain. Just walked past me like a man walking into a confession booth with too many sins to name. I followed him halfway down the hallway, then stopped. I didn't want to see what happened next. I didn't want to hear it. I just wanted to see if she'd say my name. She didn't. That was the day I knew I wasn't just being left. I was being erased. The man left after 22 minutes. I know because I counted. Not to measure his time with her, but to measure how long I could sit on the edge of the guest bed and not move a single muscle. Not shift my weight. Not blink too often. Just sit. Stillness becomes addictive when your world has no shape. It gives the illusion of control. When the door clicked shut, I stood up and listened. I didn't go to her. I didn't ask who he was. I didn't even care anymore. He hadn't spoken loudly. Their conversation was hushed, like 2 people in a waiting room trying not to disturb the other patients. But I did hear one thing before he left, her voice, almost inaudible, saying it wasn't supposed to feel like this. She didn't know I heard. I think she would have said it differently if she did. Or maybe she wouldn't have said it at all. I made a sandwich around 5. The kitchen light was flickering again. I'd been meaning to fix it. Funny how I kept putting it off for months. Now it was the only thing in the house that still demanded my attention. I chewed slowly, watching the shadows on the wall grow longer with each pulse of the faulty bulb. I left the crusts on the plate. Mallory used to scold me for that. She didn't anymore. She stayed in the bedroom that night. I stayed in the guest room again. There was no conversation. No confrontation. We had slipped into a rhythm made entirely of non-answers. I didn't even lock the door. There was no point. We were strangers cohabitating inside the echo of a memory. At some point during the night, I got up. Not because I couldn't sleep, I hadn't even tried. I walked barefoot through the hallway, opened the front door, and stepped outside. The porch was cool. The air was still. A single moth clung to the porch light like it couldn't tell the difference between heat and safety. I sat on the front step and looked at the street. I wondered what the neighbors thought. Had they seen him arrive? Did they guess what was happening behind these walls? Or were we still playing the part well enough that no one noticed we'd stopped being real? I didn't cry. That part of me had dried up. What I felt now was quieter than grief. Less dramatic. It was the slow erosion of belief, not in her, not even in us. In the idea that anything I gave ever mattered. When you're not being seen, you start to forget what your own face looks like. I stayed out there until morning. The sky turned a washed-out blue, the kind of color that doesn't promise anything, just announces that time has passed. Mallory didn't come outside. She didn't check on me. She never asked where I'd been. And that was the clearest answer I'd gotten from her since the day the package arrived at the bar. I finally understood something. It had never been about the man at the bar. Or the 3 months she spent building a second self. Or even the night she opened the ring in front of someone else. It was about how easy it was for her to stop choosing me. I think that's what betrayal really is. It's not the action. It's the quiet comfort they feel when they know they don't have to lie anymore. On Tuesday morning, I folded every shirt I owned. Not because I planned to leave that day, I didn't know when. I just knew that when I did, I wouldn't want to touch these fabrics again. The sleeves, the collars, the shirts she bought me for birthdays or no reason at all, they all felt like ghosts I was still trying to dress myself in. The closet was silent except for the soft shuffle of cotton against skin. She was still asleep in the other room or pretending to be. I didn't check. I didn't care. That morning, she could be anyone. And that was the difference. I used to know the shape of her breath in every silence. Now I didn't even know how she liked her eggs. I packed 3 bags. 2 stayed under the bed. 1 I left by the door. Not to send a message. Not to threaten. Just to feel real. I didn't write a note. I didn't call a friend. I didn't look in the mirror. Because I didn't want this to become a performance. I wasn't leaving for applause. I wasn't trying to reclaim dignity or win some moral high ground. I just wanted to stop being a background character in the place I paid rent for. At noon, she came into the kitchen, still wearing one of my old sweatshirts. It used to mean something, her in that faded maroon hoodie, sleeves too long, hair tucked in the collar like she lived there. Now it looked like she was dressing up as my memory. She saw the bag. Paused. But didn't ask. I was buttering toast. 1 slice. She leaned against the doorframe like nothing in the room had changed. You're going somewhere? I nodded. She waited. I didn't explain. After a while, she said, should I be worried? I looked at her for the first time in 2 days. Not searching for anything. Just confirming she still existed. No, I said. You don't have to worry anymore. She pressed her lips together. You make it sound like a decision's already been made. It has, I replied. But not today. That confused her. I wanted it to. I needed her to sit with the weight of not knowing when the goodbye would come. Because that's what she'd done to me, peeled away little pieces until the shape of my exit didn't even require a door. She poured herself coffee. 2 sugars, no milk. A change. She used to use almond creamer. I wondered if she stopped because he didn't like it. Or maybe she just stopped wanting the things I brought home. We didn't speak for the rest of the day. She went upstairs around 4. I heard the bedroom door click, then nothing. That night, I ate dinner alone. On the porch. Cold leftovers and a paper napkin. The moon was half gone. I stared at it and wondered if it had ever been whole or if we just imagined that fullness so we could survive the emptiness that followed. When I went back inside, I passed the hallway mirror and caught a glimpse of myself for the first time in weeks. And I didn't recognize the man staring back. Not because he looked different, but because, for the first time, he wasn't asking to be seen. He was just ready to leave. 1 toothbrush. Mine. I put it in a Ziploc and left hers in the ceramic holder. The one she said reminded her of the ocean, though she hadn't been near water in years. 3 shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, 1 coat. I didn't pack everything. Just enough to not look lost. The spare key she gave me on our 6-month anniversary left it on the windowsill. No note. No explanation. Just metal catching the edge of sunlight. The blanket from the couch stayed folded. She used to drape it across both her legs. Now she wrapped it around herself when she thought I wasn't watching. No music. No soundtrack. I moved in silence. Not out of drama but precision. She was upstairs. The floor creaked once above me. Maybe the sound of pacing. Or maybe nothing. I didn't check. In the kitchen I left behind the cast iron pan she gave me on my birthday. Said it would last longer than we would. I never thought of that as foreshadowing. I took the knife set. Not out of spite. I paid for it. She hated how sharp they were. Said they scared her. 1 drawer. Receipts. Instructions for things we no longer owned. Chargers for devices I'd already thrown away. I left them all. I unplugged my phone from the wall and slipped it into my pocket. A single notification. Not from her. A shipping update for a package I no longer remembered ordering. The hallway was cold. I stood at the front door for 13 seconds. Not long enough to cry. Not short enough to be impulsive. I turned the knob like it was someone else's house. Outside, the air was heavier than I expected. Still. Crisp. It carried no scent. I walked past the car. Kept walking. The street was quiet. The kind of quiet you don't question until you need someone to hear you leave. No one did. I didn't leave a goodbye. Not because I didn't care, but because the person I would have said it to, she wasn't here anymore. She hadn't been for a long time. And I refused to say farewell to a memory that didn't bother remembering me. The first morning after I left, I woke up before the sun. I was in a small cabin 2 towns away. Nothing extravagant. Just 1 room, 1 window, 1 crooked coffee table. A folded map sat in the corner, still unopened. I hadn't planned where to go next. That was the point. There was no missed call from her. No message. No search. But I didn't need one. For the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for anything. I sat by the window watching a thin line of light stretch across the treeline. It wasn't beautiful exactly. Just honest. Nothing was trying to impress me. The sun rose without an audience. That morning, I boiled water in a dented kettle and drank tea from a chipped mug I found in the cupboard. The tea was bitter. I drank it anyway. I didn't think about Mallory. Not her voice, not her lies, not the way her smile changed when she stopped loving me. I thought about the version of myself I used to be, the one who stayed quiet to keep the peace, who measured his worth by how little space he took up. And I promised him he didn't have to do that anymore. By noon I'd made a list. It wasn't long. Buy groceries. Fix the porch step. Read something with no underlining. Cook without wondering if anyone likes it. Wake up early again. Not out of grief, just because. In the afternoon I took a walk along a path that didn't have a name. No destination. Just steps. Air. The smell of pine. A bird I didn't recognize landing on a branch and flying away again without asking permission. I passed an elderly man sitting on a bench near a creek. We nodded. He didn't ask questions. I didn't give answers. And somehow it felt like a kind of understanding. That evening I wrote something down for the first time in months. Just a few lines. Not a letter. Not a journal. Just something I didn't want to forget. When a chapter ends quietly, it doesn't mean it didn't matter. It just means you don't owe it noise. I didn't hate her. I didn't miss her. She was a part of a story that taught me what not to settle for. And maybe, just maybe, that's the best kind of ending. The one that doesn't come with applause or heartbreak or flames, just a man walking away, softly, toward the life he finally knows how to build. Not because he's trying to escape, but because he's finally ready to arrive.